There is a specific kind of silence that arrives after you have made the hardest decision of your life. It isn't the peaceful silence of a library or the calm silence of a sleeping house. It is a heavy, ringing silence that settles in once the adrenaline of leaving has finally worn off. You have walked away. You have closed the door to protect what little love was left. You have done the brave thing, the thing everyone tells you takes courage. But now you are alone in a room that feels too big, with a glass of wine in your hand, and the realization hits you that leaving didn't leave everything behind. You carry yourself with you wherever you go, and that is the most terrifying part of starting over. We often tell ourselves that changing our surroundings will change our internal world. We convince ourselves that if we just remove the source of the conflict, the partner, the house, the city, the marriage, we will suddenly return to who we were before the pain started. We think the problem was entirely external, a storm we were merely caught in. But then the storm clears, and you look down to find that you are still soaking wet, and the water is coming from inside you. This is the moment where the story shifts from what happened to you to who you have become because of it. It is the moment Adele found herself in when the dust of her divorce began to settle. It wasn't just about the heartbreak of a marriage ending. It was the heartbreak of realizing she was a stranger to herself. It is the uncomfortable, quiet realization that maybe, just maybe, you aren't the innocent victim in your own narrative. We spend so much of our adult lives building defenses. We construct elaborate fortresses around our hearts to keep out disappointment, rejection, and criticism. We tell ourselves stories where we are the protagonist fighting against the odds. In these stories, our intentions are always pure. Our love is always enough, and our mistakes are always justifiable reactions to someone else's behavior. It is a survival mechanism. If we admitted how much damage we were capable of causing, the guilt might crush us. So we polish our armor and we point the finger outward. But there comes a time, usually in the deep quiet of the night, when the armor feels too heavy to wear anymore. You realize that in your effort to protect yourself, you have also isolated yourself. You realize that the you, who is trying so hard to be right, to be strong, to be perfect, has actually become rigid and unyielding. This is the core of the sentiment behind I Drink Wine. It isn't a song about alcohol. It is a song about the intoxication of the ego and the desperate need to sober up from the addiction of trying to be someone you are not. Think about how much energy you spend trying to control how you are perceived. We want to be seen as the kind one, the patient one, the one who tried the hardest. We curate our arguments in our heads, rehearsing the lines that prove we were justified. We recount events to our friends, framing the narrative so that they will nod and say, "You poor thing, you did everything you could." We crave that validation because it silences the small, nagging voice in the back of our minds that whispers, "You are difficult too." Adele reached a point where she couldn't silence that voice anymore. The pain wasn't just coming from the separation. The pain was coming from the recognition of her own patterns. She had to confront the reality that she was soaking it all up, taking every interaction, every look, every disappointment, and absorbing it into her identity until she was heavy with resentment. When you act like a sponge, you don't just hold on to water. You hold on to dirt, and eventually you become too heavy to lift. It is a profound act of bravery to admit that you have been demanding. Not necessarily demanding of material things, but demanding of life. We demand that life gives us closure. We demand that people understand us exactly as we intend to be understood. We demand that our partners fill the voids in our souls that were there long before they arrived. And when they fail, because they are only human, and they are tired too, we feel betrayed. We feel as though the world has broken a promise to us. Realizing you aren't innocent doesn't mean you are guilty of malice. This is a crucial distinction that takes years to understand. You can be the source of pain without intending to cause harm. You can be the reason a relationship fractured simply because your own unhealed wounds kept bumping into someone else as unhealed wounds. It isn't about being a bad person. It is about being a flawed person who stopped checking the mirror because they were too busy looking out the window. There is a line that we all eventually cross where we have to choose between being right and being free. For a long time, being right feels better. It feels safe. If you are right, then you don't have to change. If you are right, the other person is the problem, and you can wait for them to fix it. But being right is a lonely place. It is a cold pedestal. Adele's journey into this song was the decision to step down from that pedestal, to look at the mess on the floor and say, I helped make this. When you stop trying to be somebody else, you are left with the raw, unedited version of who you are. And often, that person is angry. We don't talk enough about the anger that comes with self-reflection. We are angry at ourselves for wasting time. We are angry for the things we tolerated, and we are angry for the ways we acted when we were in survival mode. We look back at arguments and cringe at our own words. We remember the silence we weaponized and the kindness we withheld. This is where the ego tries to fight back. The ego hates humility. It hates admitting that it doesn't have all the answers. It will try to convince you that if you admit fault, you lose. It tells you that if you say, I was part of the problem, you are invalidating your own pain. But that isn't true. Two things can be true at once. You can be hurt, and you can be the one who hurt someone else. You can be the one who left, and you can be the one who made it impossible to stay. The lyrics of I Drink Wine speak to a desire to return to a simpler state, a time before we learn to play these games. We look at children and envy their ability to just be. They cry when they are sad, they laugh when they are happy, and they move on. They don't analyze the subtext of a conversation for 3 days. They don't hold on to a grudge to protect their dignity. Somewhere along the way, we learned that being an adult meant suppressing our true nature in favor of a curated persona. We learned to navigate the world by projecting an image of competence and stability, even when we were crumbling inside. Adele's introspection during this era wasn't just about her marriage. It was about her relationship with the world. She realized that she was projecting her own insecurities onto everything around her. When you believe you are not enough, you start to believe that everyone else thinks you aren't enough either. You read judgment in their eyes where there is none. You hear criticism in their tone where there is only concern. You turn the people who love you into adversaries because you are fighting a war against yourself. There is a specific kind of exhaustion that comes from trying to control the uncontrollable. We try to control how much we feel, how much we care, how much we show. We try to regulate the temperature of our relationships so that we never get burned, but in doing so, we never feel any warmth. We become efficient at surviving, but terrible at living. And eventually, you just want to stop. You want to stop swimming upstream. You want to stop trying to force the world to fit your expectations. The realization that I am the problem is not a sentence to life in prison. It is a key to the cell. Once you admit that you have agency in your own suffering, you also admit that you have agency in your own healing. If you are the one making yourself miserable by soaking up the world's problems, you are also the one who can wring yourself out. You can choose to put down the heavy things you have been carrying. You can choose to stop obsessing over what others think of you. This kind of growth is painful because it requires the death of the fantasy. We all have a fantasy version of our lives where we are the hero who was wronged. Letting go of that fantasy means accepting a reality that is much grayer, much messier. It means accepting that you are capable of being petty, of being selfish, of being insecure. But it also means accepting that you are capable of change. You cannot change a narrative if you refuse to read the chapters you wrote yourself. Forgiving yourself is infinitely harder than forgiving someone else. When we forgive others, we often do it from a distance. We can say, I forgive you, and then never speak to them again. But you cannot walk away from yourself. You have to wake up with yourself every morning. You have to look in the mirror and forgive the person staring back at you for the mistakes they made yesterday and the mistakes they will likely make tomorrow. You have to learn to treat yourself with the same compassion you would offer a friend. We often think of accountability as a punishment. We think that taking responsibility means bowing our heads in shame, but true accountability is an act of love. It is saying to yourself, I love you enough to stop letting you act this way. It is saying, I respect myself enough to stop repeating these patterns. It is a gentle but firm correction. It is the difference between beating yourself up and helping yourself up. Adele's shift in perspective allowed her to see that her pain wasn't a unique tragedy, but a shared human experience. We are all stumbling around, bumping into each other, trying to find connection, while terrified of rejection. We are all trying to get over ourselves. We are all trying to stop trying to be somebody else. When you realize this, the judgment you hold for others begins to soften. You stop seeing people as villains and start seeing them as just other people who are struggling to navigate their own egos. The desire to get over yourself is perhaps the most mature wish an adult can have. It means you want to stop being the center of your own universe. You want to stop viewing every event through the lens of how it affects you. You want to be able to sit with a friend and listen to them without thinking about what you're going to say next. You want to be able to love someone without needing them to validate your existence. You want to be free from the constant, exhausting chatter of the mind that is always keeping score. It is interesting how we confuse innocence with goodness. We think that if we are not innocent, we are bad. But innocence is for children. Adults are not innocent. Adults have histories. Adults have made choices that hurt people. Adults have failures and regrets. Being an adult means carrying the weight of that loss of innocence without letting it turn you into a cynic. It means acknowledging your shadows without letting them eclipse your light. In the previous chapter of this story, we talked about the necessity of leaving to protect love. But leaving is only the physical act. The emotional act happens when you sit down in the new life you have chosen and realize that the old habits followed you there. You realize that you can leave the marriage, but you can't leave your mind. And that is when the real work begins. That is when you pour the glass of wine, not to celebrate and not to forget, but to sit with the uncomfortable truth. There is a grief in realizing you are difficult to love. It is a sharp, stinging pain to look back at a person who tried to love you and see the ways you pushed them away. You see the walls you built that they couldn't climb. You see the tests you set up that they were destined to fail. You see how your fear of being hurt actually caused the hurt. And you have to mourn that. You have to mourn the version of the relationship that could have existed if you had known then what you know now. But we cannot live in the what-ifs. We can only live in the what-nows. The realization of your own complicity is not meant to paralyze you. It is meant to liberate you. It frees you from the role of the victim. It gives you back your power. Because if you contributed to the mess, you can contribute to the cleanup. If you were part of the breaking, you can be part of the healing. This journey of self-recognition is not a straight line. It is a spiral. You will have days where you feel enlightened and aware, and you will have days where you slip back into old habits of blame and defensiveness. You will have moments where you want to scream at the world, "It wasn't my fault," and that is okay. The goal is not perfection. The goal is awareness. The goal is to catch yourself a little sooner each time. The goal is to shorten the distance between the mistake and the apology. We are all just looking for something real. We are looking for something that feels true in a world that feels increasingly performative. And the truest thing you can ever find is your own reflection, stripped of all the filters and the excuses. It isn't always pretty, but it is real. And it is the only place from which you can truly build a life that feels like your own. When you finally stop fighting yourself, a strange peace settles in. It isn't the ecstatic joy of a happy ending. It is the grounded, quiet satisfaction of being honest. You accept that you are a work in progress. You accept that you will disappoint people. You accept that you won't always get it right. And in that acceptance, the pressure lifts. You don't have to be a superhero. You don't have to be a saint. You just have to be a person who is trying. So you sit there, perhaps with your own glass of wine, or a cup of tea, or just your own thoughts, and you let the realization wash over you. You aren't innocent. You played a part. You have an ego that gets in the way. You have fears that make you irrational. And somehow, knowing all of that makes you feel lighter than pretending you are perfect ever did. You realize that you don't need to be innocent to be worthy of love. You just need to be real. The world keeps spinning, and you keep growing. You learn to listen more than you speak. You learn to pause before you react. You learn to ask yourself, is this about them, or is this about me? You learn to forgive the parts of yourself that were just trying to survive. And slowly, very slowly, you start to become the person you wanted to be all along. Not the person who never makes mistakes, but the person who knows how to own them. Question for you. What is the one pattern in your life that you finally had to admit was yours to break, not someone else's to fix?